Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining tonight's presentation, where we're going to talk about Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka is a very small island, as you all know. It's roughly the size of Ireland, but what you might not know is just how much it has to offer. So I'm going to very quickly rattle through some of what I consider to be added bonuses to your wildlife holiday. Food. I won't really go into food or start talking about it too much because I won't be able to stop, and then our Zoom allocation of time will be up, and I wouldn't have talked about anything else. But just to give you an idea, the food is just divine. I went with my friend to Sri Lanka for the first time in 2016, and ever since then she came back and has been running a successful Sri Lankan street food business as a result. So just another quick side note, another constant comfort you will have in Sri Lanka is, of course, tea. So you won't have to pack a generous supply of PG tips into your suitcase like many of us do when we go on holiday. Now, culture. Sri Lanka is steeped in history. Wherever you travel in the country, you'll be tripping over magnificent stupas, ancient monuments, and just learning from your guide about the fascinating past of the country. If you wanted to spend your entire holiday exploring the history and culture of Sri Lanka, you'd have a really full and wonderful itinerary. Beaches. Sri Lanka is known as the Paradise Isle for a reason, and this teardrop island boasts some of the most divine beaches you will ever enjoy, with sand like icing sugar and the crystal clear waters full of wildlife as well. And I look at this picture and I just wish I could close my eyes and transport myself there right now. Wouldn't that be great? However, the island is not just a paradise for its monuments, food, people, beaches, and exquisite accommodation. It's a naturalist's paradise too. And this is what I'm going to be speaking to you about this evening. So although I will only be focusing on the wildlife aisle of this candy store that is Sri Lanka, there is still so much to tell you. There are several iconic kind of draw species which will surely capture everyone who visits Sri Lanka's attention. The impressive mammals, none more so than the blue whale, but also sloth bear, leopard, elephant. However, for us wildlife lovers, Sri Lanka is a mecca for its staggering biological endemism. It boasts some of the highest rates in the world, and that's partly to do with it being an island. And as we know, isolation from a mainland really increases the level of endemism. But also the country has a wide range of altitudes from the beaches at sea level all the way up to the highlands, and this creates large climatic variations, and consequently that leads to there being really high levels of biodiversity and endemism. One of the wonderful aspects about a visit to Sri Lanka is that you can really explore so much of this small island, and with relatively short journey time between different locations. You can literally go from a morning watching leopards lazing in a tree to that same afternoon scanning the oceans for the blow of a blue whale, which to me is incredible. I will be taking you through 8 of Sri Lanka's wildlife locations to give you a taste of what each has to offer. Now, the beady-eyed of you will notice that there are 9 icons on this map, and that is because number 1 simply denotes Colombo, the country's capital, which you arrive into on a direct flight from London. So even though Colombo has itself a marker on the map and is a fascinating place to stay, by all accounts, because your flight lands there at midday, you can head straight off on your journey, and that's what most of our itineraries tend to do, and that's what I have done in the past as well. So any journey in Sri Lanka is really exciting, and once you land in Colombo and you're met by your guide, you're heading off in your vehicle somewhere, and there's so much to see from the offset, be it the stunning landscapes, the uniquely ornate buses which toot their horn very loudly as they drive by. You can be looking out the window spotting bee-eaters and a host of other birds perched on the telephone lines, or just the bustle of daily life. Perhaps you might stop at a roadside store and pick up a coconut for the ride, and the store owner will come out with a machete and chop it open for you, which is fantastic, and I did that on almost every journey. But straight away you will be immersed in this island, and home, which was just an overnight flight in the past, will just be a distant memory, forgotten entirely. So in a short drive of approximately 3 hours, 2.5 to 3 hours, heading north along the western coast, you will reach the Kalpitia Peninsula. And this is a beautiful and really unspoilt stretch of the coast. But unless you're fancy having a go at kite surfing, your focus for a visit to Kalpitia is to see spinner dolphins. And November to March is when the seas are at the calmest, and therefore generally the best season for dolphin watching. And we're actually talking about thousands of dolphins, not just a handful. You get these megapods, which can be observed, and there's several hundred at a time in a megapod. And you go out in the mornings, cruising in a small boat alongside a megapod of dolphins. And this is surely an unbeatable start to your holiday, and a really joyous experience, because these cetaceans are so entertaining and they reliably put on a show. It's in their name, the spinning behavior. Some scientists consider it to be just for a fun activity. Obviously, they're highly intelligent animals, and highly social. So this spinning in the water, up to 9 spins have been recorded at a time. This can be attributed to them just having pure enjoyment, or some researchers suggest that it's to shake off remoras and parasites. But regardless of what its purpose is for the dolphins, it's an absolute treat to watch. And you may also head out a bit further offshore to see if you can observe any sperm whale here too, because they have healthy populations off the coast and can be seen here too. So leaving the megapods of spinner dolphins behind, you continue a short way north and slightly inland to reach Wilpattu National Park. Now this park has a historical importance because it was believed to be where the Prince Vijaya from India he was banished from India, and this is where he is believed to land in Sri Lanka many centuries ago, and he went on to form the Sinhalese kingdom. But we're going to Wilpattu for the wildlife, most importantly, and it is the largest of the island's national parks. It covers an area of about 1,300 square kilometres. And the north and east of Sri Lanka are typically this lowland dry zone. So the park is comprised mostly of this dense scrub forest and also these grass covered clearings. But Wilpattu's defining feature is its intricate network of wilu, which are shallow natural lakes, and there's hundreds of them in the park. And these shallow lakes which fill with rainwater, are what sustain the flora and fauna of the park. And the name of the park, Wilpattu, actually translates to Land of the Lakes, which is, I think, a very romantic title for a national park. Sri Lanka's civil war actually meant that this area was not accessible for a really long time, and only until quite recently has it reopened up. And since doing so, it's quickly become one of the finest wildlife locations on the island. And one of the best things about Wilpattu is the opportunity to see sloth bear and leopard without the busy crowds, which, I'll be honest, in some parts of Yala, not all parts, but some parts of Yala, you can experience. So more than 30 species of mammals can be encountered in Wilpatu, and the park is becoming very reliable for leopard, elephant and sloth bear. The sloth bear here is actually a subspecies, and they thrive in this lowland dry forest. Historically, they also roamed larger swathes of the island, even up to the highlands, where the tea plantations have since pushed them back down into this lowland scrub. And these are great animals to see in the wild, and like all bears, they really are very characterful. You'll notice in this photo, and if you've seen perhaps sloth bear in the wild before, that they have this large muzzle and this big lower lip, and also you'll see in this photo the serious claws that they have, and that's because insects make up a large portion of their diet. So these physical traits are really helpful for them to excavate termites and such, and you'll often see them with mud, dirt all over their face, or whilst they're walking around the park, they've got their head down, kind of sniffing to discover where some critters might be for dinner. So Sri Lanka's leopards are actually also a subspecies, and again, they're endemic to the island. I think someone might want to tally how many times I say endemic, because I know that I'm going to be saying it a lot in this presentation, and that's because this island really is fantastic because of the levels of endemism, as I've said already. And although the leopard inhabit many pockets of areas around the island, it's Wilpatu and Yala which have the highest population densities and also range. The Sri Lankan leopard is quite fascinating because, unlike in other places like Africa and India, here the leopard are the top cat, so they don't have to compete with lion or tiger. And as a result of them being the apex predator, they have evolved to be larger than other subspecies. And as well as the physical traits of being larger, their behavior is also slightly different. For example, unlike the African or Indian subspecies, they will rarely haul their kill into trees in Sri Lanka because, as you can imagine, this is a high energy use activity and it's just not required here. Wherever there's a healthy predator population, of course, that naturally means that there must be healthy prey populations too. And for the leopard, this comes in the form of muntjac and chital deer, again, another subspecies, the chital deer of Sri Lanka. Occasionally, they'll also go for samba deer too, the larger samba deer. But also wild boar and even monkey make up the prey species for the leopard. So they've got quite a menu to choose from. So this leads us on to monkeys. From being the prey species of leopards to let's talk about monkeys. What type of monkey is Sri Lanka home to? I'm sure a lot of you recognize this as a macaque. But again, it's another endemic to Sri Lanka, the tok macaque. And these guys are distinguishable by their unkempt, moppy hairdos, and nature has given them this wall of hair at the crown of each of these monkeys' heads. And this decorative kind of wall has been compared to the brimless cap, the tok, which is how their name came about as the tok macaque. And I can't help but laugh at this photo because when I look at it, I compare it to my family in lockdown number 3 and how there's some family members more than others who are in need of a hairdressers to open ASAP. So staying at Wilpatu, we tend to suggest people to stay at Leopard Trails Camp. And this is a really special camp which gives you an authentic safari experience. You're surrounded by jungle, and in the early morning you'll be heading out, first thing, game drives, and then another afternoon one before returning at dusk, or perhaps even if you're keen to do it, so are the team, absolutely keen to take you out all day into the park, taking a picnic lunch with you and just making the most of it. There aren't many camps here, and this one actually only has 4 tents. So you really have that feel of exclusivity, which I think is really important wherever possible on a wildlife holiday. So after dusk, after you've had your dinner and you're sat around the fire, the guides will come up and they'll say, okay, let's be quiet now. And that's not because they want to, go get their sleep because they've got an early start. You'll all go quiet because you'll be starting to listen for the sounds, the calls of the Graceland loris. So this nocturnal primate resides in the tree canopies and can be found quite reliably around camp. So, once darkness comes around, your guides will take you on a kind of guided walk, a bit of a night safari to look for these amazing creatures and any other nocturnal species which will be kind of coming out and emerging in the darkness. So around camp as well, and when on safari, you'll be blessed with an absolute wealth of bird life, such as the Malabar pied hornbill and the Sri Lankan jungle fowl. And I've just got to elaborate on this species. It's a very handsome and iridescent galliform, but it's actually endemic again. But it is the national bird of Sri Lanka, if you would believe it. And raptors as well, plentiful raptors, such as this crested serpent eagle. You've got changeable hawk eagle, lots of owl species, and just if you're interested in birds, you'll be busy, that's for sure. Continuing a couple of hours inland, you head towards Minaria National Park. But you might be interested in delving into the top section of Sri Lanka's cultural triangle on the way to see more wildlife between Wilpata and Minaria. If you've got time, you might want to stop into some of the world-class World Heritage cultural sites and enjoy these in between safaris. You've got the likes of the sacred city of Anuradhapura, the ancient cities of Polynewara and Sigiriya. You've got the Dambulla cave temples, and all of these are really worth a visit. I said at the start I wasn't going to talk about all the other things that Sri Lanka has to offer, but it's hard not to. So even as you're exploring these ruins with your guide, walking around the stupas and the gardens, you'll be noticing that there is a remarkable entourage of birds who are with you this whole time, such as the woolly-necked stork, emerald dove, Alexandrine parakeet, racket-tailed drongo, which I think are just so beautiful, and you see their racket tails kind of hanging below the branches before you actually see the bird itself. It's almost like a toy for a cat, catches your eye, which is the evolutionary reason for that trait, of course. Indian pitta too, which is a lovely colourful bird. And mammals will be on the way as well, things such as mongoose, tokmakak, grey langur, giant grizzled squirrel, which sounds fun. Fun name. So I mentioned earlier how you can go from leopards in the morning to blue whales in the afternoon. And when you're here in the Cultural Triangle, you will go for a morning climb up this ancient rock fortress, which you can see in the photograph here. It's called Sigiriya. It's also known as Lion Rock. And it used to be a capital of the area and a royal palace. One for location, I think, to build a royal palace on. And you can go from a morning exploring these gardens, the ancient history of this fortress, to an afternoon watching herds of elephants. Literally in the surroundings of this incredible UNESCO heritage site, you come to Minaria and its neighbouring Habarana forest. One of the past kings, many centuries ago, built a huge water tank, which was about 300 square hectares. It was this vast water tank that they put into place, and that is now Minaria National Park. And it subsequently became an extremely important water source for the region's wild Asian elephant population. And all the time of year where that's most important is during the dry months of August and September, going slightly into October. And this is when a spectacle called the gathering takes place. And huge numbers of elephants from this enormous catchment area descend in search of this water. And because you have these big grassy plains, quite open, it really is a spectacle because you can see hundreds of elephants all together on this plain. So whilst you're here to enjoy the gathering, the spectacle of elephants, you also can combine this with some really excellent birding, interesting lizards, dazzling butterflies. It's a real package. Keeping central of the island, we then next can travel south, and we leave the dry zone of the north and head towards the highlands. And as we descend south towards Kandy, we'll notice that as we pass through the spice plantations and such, the vegetation becomes more luxuriant. Many itineraries will include a stopover in Kandy for a night or even 2 nights. If you'd like to stay for longer, I wouldn't tell you not to. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful place. It's a city which is very sacred. It is where the Temple of the Tooth is, so very important Buddhist city. But it also has a number of botanical gardens, and these are teeming with monkeys and birds. And as you can see in this tree, I apologise for the quality of the photo I took, but thousands of Indian flying foxes, and they really test the strength of the branches because there's hundreds of these trees and hundreds of these foxes which are just, you know, adorning the skies. And before dusk, around dusk time, they take to the skies, and it's like this big cloud kind of passing over you, like almost like a swarm of locusts. It's incredible. There is a historic reserve on the hill ridge in the city itself of Kandy, and it's called Udawakakeli Sanctuary. Sorry, the names of locations in Sri Lanka are still quite tricky for me. But here is a great place to see some wonderful bird species, such as the crimson-backed flameback. You've also got purple-rumped sunbird, but just so many. So if you are interested in birding, then your guide will take you into the forest and go in search of some wonderful species. So then you keep climbing, you keep heading south and continue your climb from Kandy to a place called Nuwara Eliya, and this is your access point to Horton Plains. So Horton Plains National Park is a different environment to what you've seen so far in Sri Lanka. It's this rolling upland plateau in the Central Highlands, and you have grasslands and epiphyte covered cloud forests up there. And again, it's really rich in biodiversity. So as well as enjoying the dramatic scenery, which you have here, there's, for example, there's a lookout point called World's End, and which sounds a bit dramatic, but it's because they have this escarpment which plummets nearly 1,000 meters. So if you're wary of heights, don't go too close. But if you have a clear day, you can see for miles and miles. It's quite remarkable. And it's a tourist attraction for so many people that a lot of visitors to World's End will never know the wildlife that's in this park. And they'll take a photograph perhaps of a sambar deer and carry on their way up to some tea plantations or something without realizing that the park is home to purple-faced leaf monkey, which is the second endemic monkey species of Sri Lanka. Now, I was laughing at the tok macaques for their comical fringe, but this sadly endangered species certainly have some remarkable sideburns. In bird life, is it really interesting up here too? Again, like I mentioned at the start, the varying altitudes, different climate means different species, and you will find Sri Lankan blue magpie here, which are a really stunning endemic species. And we actually had some clients, I booked them on a tailor-made itinerary in Sri Lanka, and they'd been out birding on Horton Plains, and they called me when they got back from their holiday to tell me that they'd had this incredible leopard sighting up on this plateau. So again, I mentioned earlier, there's pockets of leopards kind of dotted around Sri Lanka, and Horton Plains is one of the small pockets too. Dropping down in elevation, but still in this verdant hill country, you come off the beaten track to a wilderness area called Ashapukuna. I'm probably saying that completely wrong, so apologies again. But this place is remarkable because you actually reach this secluded camp by foot, and you therefore are experiencing a totally relaxing natural environment away from the sounds of any motors. And here you have your exploring will continue to be on foot. So it's a really great way to get a different perspective of the flora and the fauna with your guide who's been with you throughout, but also a local naturalist too. The camp also quite excitingly has a hide near a waterhole, and you can go and set up there in the evening to look for nocturnal wildlife species. And we have a small group tour, which is called Sri Lanka Off the Beaten Track, and this is one of the destinations that tour goes to. I'm a sucker for an off the beaten track itinerary, but it's actually not far off the beaten track. It's kind of a hidden gem because it's only 15 kilometers away that you have the much busier Udawalawe National Park. So the wildlife that's been thriving in Udawalawe National Park filters through to here, but importantly the tourists don't, so you get the best of both. Heading next southeast of the island to the coast, you reach the most well-known park of Sri Lanka, and that is Yala, which has this reputation that's been fairly tarnished because it can be busy, but like I said, not all areas of Yala are busy. Many people who go to Sri Lanka will keep to this to the south, the southern half of the island. So if they want to see leopard, they'll just do a quick hop to Yala and they won't go up north to Wilpatu. People come to Yala because it's got one of the highest leopard densities in the world. So really, really good chances of seeing leopard. But we now suggest that you visit a park called Kumana. Kumana National Park was formerly known as East Yala, and it's got the contiguous kind of wildlife of Yala because they border one another, but it's a relative haven for the wildlife and also the visitors because you just don't get the number of vehicles and people in this section. So that means that you can go out on safari in this area without the jeeps, but you will come across phenomenal wildlife, including leopard, jackal, sloth bear, mongoose, monitor lizards, mugger crocodile, and prolific bird life, as per the whole island. So now that you're in the south of the island, you're going to find yourself in a more tropical environment, and there's going to be more of a rainforest feel to it, and you've got teak and ebony wood. It's really quite beautiful and different to what you've experienced in the hill country and in the lowland dry zone. Now this means that there's, again, different bird life, and it's actually really packed full in this place called Sinharaja, and you've got so many insects, butterflies and birds, reptiles and amphibians here. And for this reason, it's been designated as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve and a World Heritage Site, and that's because of it holds the bulk of Sri Lanka's endemic species. And I think perhaps of all the parks and options that Sri Lanka offers, Sinharaja would always feature in my ideal itinerary. So here, mammals are rarely seen. There are purple face leaf monkeys that live here in quite healthy populations, but because it's a bit denser foliage, you're more likely to hear them than to see them. So you're coming here to explore the reptiles, the birds, and amphibians. So for any herpetologists tuned in tonight, you'll certainly want to visit this forest too. One of the many lizards that you're going to look for is this rhinoceros horned lizard, which is also commonly known as Stoddardt's unicorn, and also the horned agama. And its rostral appendage is evident in the males. It's reduced or absent in the females. But of course, I'm going to make the point, and you probably guessed already, they're endemic. So quite exciting to see those creatures. And again, you know, the variety of wildlife here is just phenomenal. You've got a really abundant and exotic number of butterflies, and there are actually 24 endemic species of butterflies in Sri Lanka, including this one which you see in the photograph called the Ceylon rose. But going from butterflies to finishing big, we head south to the coast to Marissa, and this is our access point for a cold beer on the beach, and also to explore the mammoths that patrol the Indian Ocean. Blue whales. So November to April, these can be reliably found in the waters. They really enjoy the deep waters, which are just a few kilometers offshore. So you head out in a small boat, and they can actually be surprisingly elusive in a way, even with their 100-ton bulk, which is surprising, I guess. But partly because of their weight, they don't really break the surface very much at all, not like humpbacks or other breaching whales. But why this is a good area to see blue whales is because the waters are generally quite calm. So you're spotting them by scanning the horizon for their blow, and that's easily done in a way because this blow reaches 9 meters high, and that is what indicates their presence. So these whales, they spend a lot of time deep down, you know, feeding, traveling, and they come up for some air, and to kind of reoxygenate, they will blow, and after that initial blow, they're going to stay up for a while, kind of coming back to the surface again and again, just to get more oxygen before they go down again. So when you see one of these tall blows shooting out, you'll head over in that direction, and you're going to see them several times more closer up before they move off on their way again. So whilst concentrating on the blue whales, which without doubt we're going to because they're incredible to see, there are also other cetaceans in these waters, including brides and pilot whale. But sending us off in this last destination, in the same way that we were greeted in the first, will be spinner dolphins. So we've come full circle back to the spinner dolphins to finish our little tour of Sri Lanka. So I hope I haven't sent you all to sleep. But if you have stayed with us and you've got any questions, Chris and I will be delighted to help you.
Goodness gracious, thank you very, very much. It's so nice having a really nice, chilled out, relaxed tour of the country. And although I wasn't drinking a Sri Lankan beer whilst you were talking, I was drinking a beer. It was very nice. And particularly nice hearing your lovely talk about Sri Lanka. Thank you so much. That was absolutely super. Usual story, lots of questions, and undoubtedly not enough time to answer them all or to ask them all and for them to be answered. But the first thing that I'm going to send in your general direction is a question which a couple of people have asked about traveling around the country. I mean, like you, I've been there. I went there a long time ago. I think I went there in, oh goodness, anyway, a long time ago. And I know you've been far more recently than me. When I travelled around the country, I went with my wife and kids. You and I were chatting about this before we started, weren't we? But and it was absolutely super. And we went by minibus. But what's your recommendation, and how do we generally move people around the country? Is a question I've had 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, it's much the same now as it was when you visited. In that,
Horse
when
and
you, sorry.
Horse and cart when we went.
Yeah, exactly. Or we might just send you off with a backpack and
yeah, fantastic.
It's not too far.
No.
No, but seriously, you are met on arrival in Colombo, and you have a guide throughout your itinerary, a naturalist guide who, we have a phenomenal team of naturalist guides out there, but you tend to have the same one throughout. So they'll meet you with an air-conditioned vehicle, depending on if you're a tailor-made pair or if you're a small group, will determine the size of the vehicle, and that will kind of take you throughout. But that's just the A to B to C transport. When you're actually at the parks, when you're on safaris, you're going in open-sided, open-top vehicles. You've got the aircon for the roads, and you've got the fresh air for the safaris.
And it's a cool combination, isn't it? It's nice because you actually need the closed vehicles to be able to sort of whiz relatively swiftly from one place to another.
Exactly. Yeah.
You chill out when you're in the park. So that's really cool. Thank you. One person, Andy, has just asked about getting to Sri Lanka from the UK. Let's go with that. I know we've got international people on listening to us now, but let's go with the UK because it's kind of simpler. Airlines that go there, frequency.
Yeah. So daily flights from London to Colombo direct. So it's ideal. You can take an overnight flight or a same-day flight, depending on when you can first get on the plane. And normally we suggest, if you want the direct flight, to go with British Airways or Sri Lankan Airways. And I've flown with both on that route, and they've both been wonderful. As I said earlier, I love Sri Lankan food, so that would actually be a tipping point to make me go on Sri Lankan Airways, because I can have a delicious curry whilst I fly. But they're both great options, and they both take you there very drama free and quickly.
Cool. So I know you've mentioned this during the course of your presentation, but someone has just asked if you would be kind enough to reiterate the best time of year to go. And of course, as we've said before on these presentations, it depends exactly what it is you want to go and see and so on. But perhaps a bit of a broad shape, just reiterate what you said earlier would be super.
Yeah, no, it's really important actually, and as you say, it really does depend on what you want to see. And I kind of took you through a lot of destinations, but your typical itinerary isn't going to be all of those, so you're likely to just, well, depends how long you want to go for, but depending on where you want to go varies on what time of year you should go. And that's because Sri Lanka is not quite as straightforward as a lot of countries when it comes to best time of year to go and climate. And that's because it's got like a dual monsoon where the north and eastern part of the island has a different pattern to the south and western part, and then the middle part again is kind of doing its own thing too. So generally Sri Lanka is considered a year-round destination, and that's because depending on where you want to go, it can be. So they operate in different ways, but October and November is kind of a good gap between the two. December's also great, better so in the south. If you're heading more north, you're going to get a bit more rain if you're going in December. January, February, March is also good. I'd say avoid April because that's when you get the monsoon in the south, and I would imagine most itineraries will want to see at least one of the destinations in the south as well. But depending on what you want to do, we can go through that again with you on a kind of more detailed
and on a more personal basis, right? Just depending on what you want. So I'm going to pick up on something that you said there, because it was really cool, because in actual fact, two people have asked a similar question in a slightly different way. So one person, and I'm Katie, it has asked, but I'm going to slightly reword her question, has said, can you realistically do all the key parks in one trip? Katie, I hope you don't mind, I'm paraphrasing what you've put, but Katie has asked, can you do that? Can you realistically do all of the key parks in one trip? And someone else who is quite a bit further up the chat, and it will take me a minute or two to find it, so forgive me, but has said, how long would you need in order to do the ultimate wildlife safari, so sort of seeing all wildlife possible? It's kind of the same question asked in a slightly different way, but
I think we should be naming that one the ultimate Sri Lanka wildlife safari, which takes in all those. So thanks for that one. And yeah, absolutely, we could do that tailor-made for you. Thinking about it, you would probably want at least 3 weeks to do justice to that. I would say if you can go for four, to really kind of, make the most of each destination. You don't want to be just spending 2 nights in each, because it would probably feel like a bit of a rush, and you want to perhaps have 3 nights in certain ones. So yeah, 3 to 4 weeks for the ultimate Sri Lanka. And you could do it, you could do the whole thing in one trip. Probably October, November would be the best. You'd be a bit more restricted on dates if you're covering all those areas. And if you're happy to potentially get a little bit of rain one day, it'll clear up in the afternoon probably. So yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like a great idea, doesn't it?
It does.
Going for 5 weeks, 4, well, I don't know, whatever, 3, 4, 5 weeks, and just trying to just blast it and do absolutely everything for the ultimate Sri Lanka trip. My goodness, what a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Hey, you mentioned at one point in your presentation, you mentioned a hide for nocturnal species, and Sue has posed the question of where that was, just a reminder of where that was, and what kind of species might you see if you went into the hide?
So the place where there's the hide is the off the beaten track destination, which is the one that's near Dawalaway, called Ashapokora. I can't pronounce it, Ashapokora. And there at the hide you can see species like the palm civet. There are actually populations of fishing cat and rusty spotted cat, as well as slow loris. There's actually 2 species of slow loris.
Cool.
And in the evenings as well, at night, you can also see leopard too. So there's quite a number of species that you can see, albeit the smaller ones can be quite elusive still. But you've got to go looking, don't you? And you'll have your guide with you as well.
And plenty to see. I mean, you're not going to get bored, are you, in the hide? And hides are often photographers, but Warren has asked a really cool question here, which is Yala the only place that you would recommend for photographers? I know what my answer would be to that, but
absolutely not. No. I mean, I would say if there was a photographer wanting to go to Sri Lanka, I'd almost say go to Wilpatu rather than Yala, because it's really stunning landscape. Like I say, the land of lakes. It's that kind of dry, open, slightly more open landscape as well. So really great for photography. And then throughout, you've got such stunning and diverse landscape, and you probably saw in some of the photographs, the bird life is really exquisite. There's so many iridescent species. Yeah, I mean, Yala would be great, but no more so than anywhere else for photography, in my opinion.
No, and of course, you know, Sri Lanka is not, I mean, you mentioned this right at the beginning, but Sri Lanka is not just brilliant for wildlife. It's just a cultural immersion, isn't it? In some respects, it's a bit like India in that sense, with just amazing food and fabulous people and just beautiful scenery.
Yeah.
You know, what's not to like? Take your camera and, you know, make sure you look the other side of the camera as well, but kind of don't put it down. Don't leave it behind at any stage, I would say. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, you're going to have lots of very full memory cards from a trip to Sri Lanka, and like you say, it'll be full of wildlife, but also full of all the other many things that Sri Lanka has to offer.
So what about combining? Let's say, what about combining a wildlife trip with other things? I mean, could you do? Are there some cool beach extensions you could do? Could you combine it with some nice cultural stuff? I mean, of course, we know the answer to that. We can combine it with nice cultural stuff. But other suggestions, maybe for other extensions and things?
Yeah, I mean, Sri Lanka lends itself wonderfully to the tailor-made option, and we do a number of small group tours there, which are fantastic. But we can tailor-make those extensions before and after for those as well. And whether that's where your interest lies in having a bit of time at the beach, there's a number of exquisite beaches and properties that we can suggest to you. Also, cultural places to stay, wonderful too. There's also some really kind of unique and unusual accommodations. There's somewhere called the Mud House, which is up in the further north between Kapiti and Wilpatu area, and that just gives you that kind of cultural immersion, and also you can do things like cooking courses. There's just, you know, wherever your interests lie, there's something for you that can be that attachment to the wildlife side of it. So it's kind of what you want to decorate the wildlife with on your holiday.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place. Even yoga, how about that?
Yoga, yeah.
Yoga and wildlife. What a cool idea! I'd do that. It'd be great. And so you mentioned lodges, and I well, from my own experience, I know there's some super places to stay. But since I've been there, there's been an absolute growth in properties. But there are some nice places to stay in your view, and at different levels. Are there sort of top level places and, you know, and medium level of the type that our guests would generally like to stay in?
Yeah, there's a whole mix of places to stay, and depending on what you want your budget to be, we can make those suggestions for you. There's a whole range from places where there's, like I said, 4 tents and they're really exclusive, and there's places that are unusual and off the beaten track, and then there's places which are more kind of set up to cater to more people and are less expensive, but they all tick so many of the boxes. They're all so friendly, they all have amazing food. I would happily stay in the majority of hotels and shacks. When I first went, I was backpacking, so I had one idea of what to expect, and even that was incredible.
Well, and it's such a fabulous place. So look, I'm conscious of the time. It's rocking on towards 25 to 9. One final question, if I may, and that is value for money. Is Sri Lanka good value for money? Is it better value for money than other places? Do you get more leopards for your dollar in Sri Lanka than you do in Kenya? I don't know, I'm making that up. But what's it like, value for money?
Yeah, no, you could. I believe it to be a very good value for money destination. the flights aren't too expensive getting there, and when you're there, so many of the things are nowhere near as expensive as other destinations in the world. Like South America and Africa can be a lot more expensive than your Asian safaris. It's probably quite similar to your Indian kind of price point, but you can really get some good value. You can see so much and experience so much out there without having to spend a huge amount.
And I think I would also reiterate what you said, Sarah, about the team that we work with in Sri Lanka, who we've been working with for donkey's years. I've been working with the guys in Sri Lanka probably for 20 plus years, and they are slick as you like. They are just so lovely. They're great to us, aren't they? Their response times are absolutely fantastic, which is obviously good from our point of view. From the point of view of people going on holiday, we know how good they are and how well everybody's looked after by our team out in Sri Lanka. So they're really great. And obviously we would very much encourage everybody to talk to us, myself and Sarah and the rest of our colleagues, about going on a trip to Sri Lanka. Sarah, thank you so much. That was really, really super. Thank you very, very much indeed.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for joining.
I trouble you to put that last slide on. Or maybe that was the last slide. No, there was a last slide, isn't there?
It is this one.
So for everybody who is still on board, and again, thank you for joining us this evening. Just reiterate, the next two talks coming up. Tomorrow lunchtime's talk is very, very different to the talks that we've been doing in the evenings. It is a full-on look at Namibian self-drive safari, absolutely specifically the details of that trip. That's been done by Nick Joins, who knows Namibia like the back of his hand. And then the next evening talk is on Tuesday, which is Discover Tanzania, and that's being done by Helen Bryan. Once again, thank you very much to everybody for being on board. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was absolutely super. And we'll see you all next time. And with that, we will end. Thank you.